Okay, we'll start with this. Well, apparently boxing champ Clarissa Shields is targeting a mixed martial arts fight in 2020, and Kayla Harrison has offered to train her. In truth, I tried to stay away from these stories, tried not to give them any air, because I'm not a fan of these kinds of crossovers. That's mostly because, as far as I'm concerned, it's not passion, rather profit, that motivates these kinds of crossovers. Clarissa Shields has expressed that she doesn't think that boxing deserves her. And this is a part of the reason she's considering crossing over into mixed martial arts. We've seen this sentiment expressed more or less from Heather Hardy, Ava Knight, who very recently made her Bellator debut, and it was a successful debut. Though it's really not how you start, it's how you finish. And that allows me to allude to my point. At a time when anyone from Clarissa Shields to Tyson Fury is considering entering into the octagon, and the less educated fight fans might be intrigued by these kinds of crossover matches, myself, I'm not a fan of them.
Why?
Because the basic idea, at least for me, the intrigue of watching two combatants square off against each other is the competitive element and who will be the victor, whereas a boxer crossing over into mixed martial arts or a mixed martial artist crossing over into boxing, that's not intriguing to me so much as a spectacle, because that's what it denotes. It's a spectacle. When Conor McGregor so decided to debut against the likes of Floyd Mayweather, my thoughts on that were, it's a circus.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. It's a circus act. It's a freak show. And when I see that Clarissa Shields is considering, crossing over just in reverse, crossing over into the octagon, I think to myself that, this is likely a byproduct of Clarissa's unique problem. You see, Clarissa Shields, she's on the heavier end of the spectrum in terms of female fighters. And in women's boxing, the talent pool is deeper the lower you go. Lower as in the weight classes, whereas Clarissa debuted in what was a virtual ghost town at 168. 160's got a little bit more talent, though, not that much more, and virtually no big names to have a big, marquee, multi-million-dollar fight. And 154, the talent pool, once again, it is a little bigger than it is at 160, and a lot bigger than it is at 168. But the same applies that in the realm of big marquee fights with big marquee opponents, the kind of matchups that you'd expect, in men's boxing, well, when 154, it's got names, it's got fights, there are champions, but maybe not to the liking of a Clarissa Shields, because Clarissa wants, big fights, really big fights. And it's hard for any fighter campaigning in those particular weight classes to land those kinds of opponents. Thus, she sees mixed martial arts as an avenue of opportunity. But in that way, it denotes what I'm talking about. That the motivating factor behind crossing sports isn't passion so much as profit. And I'm of the opinion that profit in and of itself is not the right reason to make such a move. Both boxing and mixed martial arts, they're very different sports that are officiated and operate in very different ways.
Worlds apart.
And they're very jealous sports. They're very jealous disciplines that require 100% focus from all the participants. Thus, trying to multitask, participate in both simultaneously, like Heather Hardy did, well, I feel that that's more or less courting disaster, because these two different disciplines are so physically demanding, such jealous sports, that you can't possibly be giving 100% to both.
Hey, seriously.
And if you simultaneously try to participate in both, you're likely dividing your time. You're not giving either of them 100%, rather each of them 50%, And you're just not going to compete at the elite level on that kind of a schedule with that kind of a situation. There were talks coming from Clarissa Shields' side of things that she'd like to fight the likes of an Amanda Nunes. And the idea, the selling point, as it were, is that, Amanda's an elite-level mixed martial artist, and Shields, being an elite-level boxer, that somehow, I guess that's supposed to be the precedence for the two to lock horns. When, that's basically like saying that, well, because you're an elite-level golfer, you're going to be an elite-level basketball player. I mean, yes, they're both sports, but they're very different sports. And in the realm of mixed martial arts and boxing, well, yes, they're both combat sports, but they are very different. What might work for Amanda in a cage might not do her any service in the ring, and the same is true in the case of Clarissa Shields, that will, what might work for you in the ring might not work for you in the cage. If the effort is earnest to cross over and have success, you start from the bottom and work your way up. And that basically characterizes why I'm not a fan of these crossovers. You got, I think, Tyson Fury talking about fighting Fury-Miopic or something or other, an elite level guy in his respective sport, whereas Tyson Fury is an elite level guy in his respective sport. But there's not much of a middle ground there. I mean, if we're being realistic, I don't expect, the myopic guy to have a whole heap of success crossing over to fight an elite level boxer any more than I'd expect Fury to have success crossing over to fight an elite level mixed martial artist. It stands to reason. And these kinds of crossovers, they only really do intrigue and captivate
mature people,
the less intelligent members of the fight fan community, whether it's MMA or boxing. That they get all wrapped up in it as if it's a real contest, when in actuality, all it really is a guy who's out of his element, should not be doing this, and he's only really doing it for money. Yeah, it's pretty much whoring yourself to some degree. Because if the effort is earnest to have success in a new sport, then you have to take it seriously. But, how seriously do you take it when you think you're ready for the elite level right out the gate? In that way, that characterizes that it really is more of a spectacle than a genuine, bona fide contest.
Competition.
When we're talking about boxing or mixed martial arts, it takes these athletes, these combatants, years to hone and work on their craft and fully develop as fighters in their respective disciplines. It takes a long time. It's not just something that you just do it. You just decide to do it. That shows a lack of respect for the discipline, a lack of respect for a sport. When you think, you're just going to go in there and you're just going to do it your way and you're just going to have your way. No. I mean, that's not even really an earnest effort so much as a cash grab. So for this reason, I'm not a fan of these kinds of crossovers. I've used this analogy in the past that, you can have a baseball player. He's got a home run swing, fantastic home run swing. He'll get it out the park every time you throw it. But that home run swing doesn't mean a heck of a lot on a football field, does it? And the same is true in reverse, So when I think about these boxer / MMA guy, MMA girl crossovers and vice versa, that's what immediately comes to mind. That whatever success you had in your respective discipline may not cross over into another. Thus, it's really not a contest. Not until you fully develop and build yourself up. And in most of these situations, there is not adequate time for, someone crossing over from one discipline into another to really develop. It really is just a cash grab whenever it's mentioned. Clarissa Shields lending her name and what accord she's gotten as a boxer to potentially fighting the likes of an Amanda Nunes, when Clarissa Shields is an amateur, a novice in the realm of mixed martial arts, and you want to challenge an elite level mixed martial artist. Well, that's not really a contest. That's a greenhorn versus an elite fighter. In that way, it's a mismatch. If they put Amanda Nunes in there with you in a boxing ring, be the same thing. It's a mismatch. Okay, that's what you're trying to sell people. This kind of primitive person that is intrigued by these kinds of matches are more or less the kind of people we used to see in the 80s. Back when, it was the wrestler versus the boxer. That, if that wrestler gets his hands on the boxer, that's all she wrote. Or, if that big wrestler with all those big muscles so decides to lace up the gloves, well, they just ain't got the cardio for it. So inside of 2 rounds, they're going to fade. I mean, that's essentially what it denotes, that, whatever success you have in your respective discipline may not, in all likelihood won't, cross over into the other. You're going to have to fully acquaint yourself with that other discipline in order to have success in it. If it is an earnest effort and not just a cash grab. I mean, that's what I think about it. And I hope that these situations don't actually come into fruition, because in some ways, when the fighter falters in a sport that they're not really fully acquainted with, it denigrates their abilities and what they've managed to accomplish so far. Conor McGregor going in there and losing to Floyd Mayweather, that doesn't mean that Conor McGregor was a bad mixed martial artist. That just means he's not cut out for boxing. And if some boxer goes in a cage, loses in the octagon, well, that doesn't mean that boxer's a bad boxer. That just means they're not cut out for being in the cage. You've got to fully immerse yourself and start from the ground up to have success. So anything short of that in what are very rigorous sports, well, anything short of that is courting disaster. And I fear that with these crossover, these big name crossover matches, the right effort isn't being put in because it's not being done for the right reasons. Now, moving on. I couldn't close out the night without touching on a recent development in regards to this weekend's fight, the guaranteed purses to the fighters for what is the rematch between Deontay Wilder and Luis Ortiz. It is being reported per the commissions that Deontay Wilder is being guaranteed $3 million.
What?
Whereas Luis Ortiz is being guaranteed $1.5 million.
Wait a minute.
Saying that this is substantially less than both of these fighters were offered to fight Anthony Joshua really is an understatement, okay? I mean, in all honesty,
Turn down that for this.
we all know how pay-per-views work. Only a nominal amount of money is guaranteed to the fighters with the hope that the bulk of the money they stand to make comes from the upside.
After it breaks even.
But when you're talking about this particular pay-per-view, it's questionable as to whether or not there will even be an upside. Because the fight fans, they weren't asking for this. There's no buzz around this fight. And
That's what you call smart business?
if you're hoping that you make most of your money off the upside and the upside isn't on the up and up, well, what does that tell you?
You're dumb!
This is what smart business looks like to a PBC fan. Luis Ortiz turning down a guaranteed $7 million to fight Anthony Joshua to stand in as he said he would stand in. He said he'd be willing to stand in for Jarrell Miller if it didn't work out. And it didn't work out, but, Luis Ortiz, he didn't stand in. He chose to sit down, sit on his hands, or his team fumbled the ball, or whatever the fuck the cover story was. Once again, this is what smart business looks like to a PBC fan.
This guy.
Deontay Wilder. You always hear his fans talking about how taking the DAZN offer would have put a cap on his potential earnings, that he could have very well went on to earn more than that, more than just a flat number that DAZN offers him. But you see what he's guaranteed, right? What are the odds that the pay-per-view does so well that Deontay Wilder himself clears $40 million? Hell, $20 million.
Pretty slim.
Oh, man. There was a recent article put out there talking about the DAZN offer to Wilder. John Skipper admitting that perhaps they didn't approach the situation the right way. Maybe they could have developed more of a rapport with the people that they were dealing with.
It is what it is. Too late now.
Look, that's all well and good. But there's no real question as to whether or not the offer was an earnest offer, because immediately after the offer was made to Wilder, and the offer was subsequently rejected, Shelly Finkel himself said that they made the offer with the interest of seeing the fight get done.
This was not the right time for the offer, and time will show what he's going to be doing, and it'll be bigger and more profit and a better career for him.
Do you believe they were acting in good faith by making the offer, that they're genuinely interested in getting Deontay to come over?
Yes, but we also feel when Deontay knocks Joshua out, we want millions and millions of people to see it, and at this point, DAZN doesn't have that.
DAZN caters to several countries around the world. Are you sure that they don't have that? I mean, they do cater to several countries globally, all around the planet. Yet, according to Shelley, that's what he really took issue with, whether or not millions upon millions of people would be able to see the fight. We all know DAZN caters to several markets around the world, but as far as the offer itself, and whether or not it was an earnest effort and a sizable offer, according to Shelley, it was. So, we won't be needing anyone's revisionist version of history here. We have the footage, we have the quotes, verbatim. It was a real offer, and we know what it was for. Shelly Finkel himself referenced the Anthony Joshua fight and how what they want is for millions upon millions of people to be able to watch Wilder knock him out, because that's what the offer was for Wilder to cross that street and fight Anthony Joshua. And did everybody forget that it was Wilder who said he's a free agent who can go anywhere to fight anyone? But why didn't he go there?
That's a good question.
I mean, since having not gone there, has Wilder actually made the kind of money that DAZN offered him? I understand that there are many moving parts behind the scenes that could result in additional revenue for the likes of a Deontay Wilder. I understand that. But I also understand that the same is true for Anthony Joshua, except when it's about Anthony Joshua, the reported figures are a hell of a lot bigger than anything Wilder's got going on. That's the reality of it. I mean, even now, Anthony Joshua is reportedly making $85 million for this Ruiz rematch. $85 million. Whereas when it comes to Wilder, all he is guaranteed is a meager $3 million, with the hope that this pay-per-view sells enough, it brings in, so many pay-per-view buys, that hopefully he'll make some coin, but like I said, there's no buzz around this fight. So if you're relying on the upside when it might not be on the up and up, well...
You bet on yourself, remember?
Did you really make a smart move? I mean, did you really? Is this what smart business looks like in PBC land? I know what Wilder's fans are going to say. Oh, these Eddie Hearn guys are pocket watching. They're pocket watching Ortiz. They're pocket watching Wilder. And they'll say this because they don't actually have a rebuttal for the facts as they are. So they got to try to, move the goalposts. That's what they do. They'll accuse people of pocket watching when, in all actuality, the only reason that anybody's paying close attention to what Wilder stands to make and what Ortiz stands to make is because these are guys that were claiming they were lowball.
Remember?
These are guys that were claiming that Joshua doesn't want that fight, yet Joshua has offered the both of them substantially more than they stand to make with each other. Understand, these two guys could go in there and fight for 2 fucking almond joys. It wouldn't make the least bit of difference to me. The only reason I'm looking at what they're, standing to make for the fight is to find out whether or not these two guys were pricing themselves out, whether or not their demands were reasonable. And what time has shown is that both of these guys were highly unreasonable. That you guys own earning power, it doesn't put you anywhere near what this man offered you for a fight at a time when you claimed he was ducking you. But, what you guys can make on your own, it's nowhere in the neighborhood of what he offered you. So, I mean, where do you get that he was ducking you? In all honesty, I'd say that both of these guys better hope that Joshua wins the Ruiz rematch because he still represents the biggest payday. But it's pretty clear, at least to me, that even if he does win, these guys don't want it. They didn't want it before, and they likely won't want it after because they're happy playing it safe and earning less with each other. Which is cool, but you don't fool me.